We're back here on the program Jones and Company today, and we are talking about violence. And there's indeed a culture of violence in the society, and no day passes when we do not have police reports about the level of violence in our heartland communities. And so we have a problem of how we socialize our young people. Your task force, I believe you might want to, or you are looking at that, 10, 11, 12-year-old young men and women who are sometimes armed, sometimes dangerous, and who are being socialized to be violent. How are you going to address that?
I think you've hit it on the head. They are being socialized to be violent. We need the political and social will to socialize them to be nonviolent. It is a learned behavior. And it comes about by picking each one of those youngsters. And we have a small country. We should be able to do this. And beginning to turn their heads through education. In other words, programs, all right? Programs in which we seriously go into the communities. I could begin by telling you of one of the programs in which we choose 100 young men out of each school. And they are given a 6-month course in which they will learn alternate dispute resolution. They will learn other issues about themselves, about their self-worth, about their respect that is due to other persons, including their sisters, their mothers, and their brothers. Now, this is some of the first time that they will have been socialized about being social. Some of them have had no enculturation at all. And so we as a society have a responsibility to begin that. Now, it's true. We're beginning, and the tide is rushing hard against us. The tide of violence and the tide that's sweeping all of them in one direction. But I'm tired of it, and it's time to stand, and it's time to stand in the midst of that tide and say, we'll have no more, and you will now start a process. The process, as I say, this is one of the programs. There has to be many, and that's why we're going to get to what the task force really wants to do. But one of the programs is to choose maybe 100 young men out of every school and to bring them together in a 6-month program. They will complete this program, all working together, and after that, they are put into the care, as it were, of role model older persons, such as yourself. Now, you can't handle 100 young men, but there will be ways in which we'll partition them off so that they are constantly being monitored and mentored by older persons who show them how to grow up and be men or be women, all right? This continues with that first cohort of maybe 700 young men. As soon as that's finished, or as soon as we can, we move into another 700 and another 700. And the same program continues probably 2-3 years. We begin to socialize these young people to understand that there is a humanity in them and not a dishumanity.
I'm glad you said that, Mrs. Nottage, and Dr. Dillet. You know, there are many people who are victims of violence, who are victims themselves. They are in our prisons because they are victims of violence. And what do I mean? Young men who grew up in neighborhoods where there was a violence run amok. And they experienced a whole lot of social injustice. Yes. And as a result of the social injustices that they have experienced, they themselves became violent.
Absolutely.
And so, doesn't society have to deal with the social injustices that we have so that we can disabuse these young men of being violent?
Well, absolutely, Mr. Jones. Persons who have been either the victims or have witnessed violence are about 500 times more likely to become perpetrators. Men are more likely to become perpetrators. Women are more likely to become victims if they saw their mother or their father or whatnot being abused in their family. Those are the hard research statistics. We have to now invest in our social and our mental health programs, identifying these young men and women who are at risk, putting in the support that they need early on when there's a chance that these persons can be saved, as opposed to now dealing with these individuals when they're in prison or when they're in the communities and, you know, their life are in shambles. It is an investment on our future to intervene early on. It will cost society less in finances, in pain, in crime, and every other statistic or measurable that you can think of. We have not invested enough in our social and our mental health services. And I believe that's where it will begin. This problem will only be solved if we start to look at this like any other major problem in the country. We like to throw money here, we like to throw money there, but until we start to put the resources, both human and financial, in those areas, we will not see the success that we need. And we need this. The country is dying from crime. It is crying from the pain and the emotional turmoil of families who are either one family is mourning because their relative was killed, or another family is mourning because their relative is now going to prison. We have to save our country, and we have to start investing long-term into our people.
Let me show you another area of injustice, and that, I guess, violence, they say, begets violence. A young man who is from the family of Haitian immigrants to the Bahamas. He cannot get certain opportunities in his country. And as a result, he becomes violent because he believes that the society has not dealt with him or his parents justly.
That is very understandable. But again, because he has been deprived of the ability to regularize either if it's a citizenship issue or if it may be just the ability to go to school because he doesn't have a certificate of identity, right? We need to find these issues, sort them out, and get these individuals on the right track. And so, yes, it demands even going back to some of the issues of constitutional matters that you and I talked about. Pathways being created for citizenship for certain individuals who just cannot find a way, all right? Resolving the problems. But we must have the political will to begin to resolve them, because the more we allow that person who's now 10 years old to get to be 16 and then on into 20, he's really beginning to be a hardened person on the street. And so that's why I'm saying the programs must begin now. And we've got to stop dilly-dallying about it and throwing a little bit of money, as Dr. John has said, in this program for this particular community. It's an overall national program. And what we're hoping to establish is a gender-based violence or a violence system, whereby there would probably be created an overall national statute or act that will establish a secretariat. In that secretariat, we will have the core of professional people who will begin to look at the national problem and assess programs nationally, not just programs coming out of community development or coming out of the Red Cross or coming out of the Crisis Center, but national programs. Now, this will need money, and this is often where we have failed, because we propose programs and then we hand them on to government, and government says, I don't have the money, you know, so what? We are proposing a joint public-private partnership whereby there will be, as it were, a committee of ministers of the relevant ministries that have to be approached: the Attorney General, the Minister of Health, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Social Services, to name the relevant ones. They will form, as it were, a ministerial committee. And it would be to them that we would go for the necessary backup of laws and whatnot is needed to get the structure right. But then, working side by side with that ministerial oversight committee will be a foundation which will have the ability for private citizens and even funding from abroad to be given towards specific projects. which have been approved by the Secretariat, specifically managed. Now, not only are we going to ask the Secretariat to be the filter of approving these projects, but it also has to be able to regulate and hold accountable the persons who are initiating and activating these projects. Too often we get a project starting here in a small community. Oh yes, I can take care of 50 boys, and next year you don't hear anything about them, but they're still getting money, and you have no accountability as to what happened to the first 50 boys or what's happening to the next 50. So this will also have a Secretariat that demands accountability and demands, before you get anything further, to show slate, as it were. What did you do? Where has the program taken this community in the last 12 or 24 months, whichever you've been given? There will also be a requirement in this Secretariat that we, as it were, credentialize the people who are working in these projects. Often we find that you get counselors who really need counseling themselves, and they mislead some of the people they're counseling.
So you have to certify your counselors.
Exactly.
They have to be well-trained.
Training.
Properly trained professionals.
Yes. You know, as you spoke of that, I know wife beating
Yes.
is something that your task force is extremely concerned about. But, Doctor, in recent times in our country, we have seen a whole lot of violent women who have used knives on men, on husbands, on boyfriends, and all the rest of it. And you are a forensic psychiatrist. What goes through the mind of a woman to use such force?
Well, I think the first thing is never to generalize, and each case is specific.
Yes.
Because whether it's a male or female who's committing violence, there's a particular characteristic makeup of that individual. Now, there are some persons who are more predisposed to violence because of personality traits. Then there are those who react because of the circumstances that they may be in. From what I'm getting, you're talking about maybe someone who themselves have been abused, perhaps, and now are retaliating and then perpetrate violence on perhaps an attacker or perhaps someone who might have abused them. Think of it yourself. If you were in a situation and you were undergoing significant stress daily, whether it be physical or emotional, everyone has a breaking point. Everyone. This is the reason why we have mass shootings in other countries. This is the reason why we have wars and conflicts, because no matter who you are, you have a certain point at which you reach a stress level and you simply can't take any more. What we have to look at is our country, our society is very stressful. How do we provide support to individuals who are not coping well with these problems? Culturally, again, we have to learn that everyone is valuable in our society. No one has the right to abuse someone else. No one has the right to take away their liberty or to deprive them of everything that life has to offer based on marriage or based on age or based on religion or race or anything else. We all deserve to be free and happy. We have to understand that together we can come together and move forward if we treat each individual with respect. That is the only way, because today you're the perpetrator, the next day you're the victim.
Can I just step in on one issue?
Yes.
And I know it's your show. But it's interesting that you would talk about the women who are now killing or murdering or whatever. And you know, in the law, we're now developing or following what is called the battered wife syndrome. And it speaks to exactly what Dr. John has said. Everyone has a breaking point. And often the history behind that particular woman, it might be a wife or it might be a girlfriend, may be that there has been consistent violence or suppression of some sort in the relationship. And there's a breaking point at which somebody says, I am not taking it anymore. And so the battered wife syndrome is something that the law is exploring as a defense. I don't think it's been accepted yet in our legal system, as it were, in the Bahamas. But it is something that we need to look at. And it goes to the mental effect that violence has on the individual. The threshold that I may have for accepting or tolerating violence is very different from yours. And so I may crack at the slightest word that's been said to me, but you could take more. However, there's a point at which you break. And the battered wife syndrome is exactly that. The previous history has to be given to show why, at this point, there was a snap and there was an element of I can take no more. I want to go on to one other thing. Femicide, which is the killing of women. We in this country seem to be moving more and more to hearing of women who are being killed by their lovers. And already for the 2014 year, there have been 4 reported, so-called, as I understand it. What is interesting to me is from the statistics is that each of these 4 were murdered on a Sunday morning usually they find it. Where are our young people on Sundays nowadays? We used to be getting ready for church or ironing our dress for church or getting ready to do something now, but where are they? That they are in an environment that obviously has caused tremendous stress and even death to them. So you see, this causes us to think about our cultural change. And maybe we need to see more of the reversion back to what we knew to be good and correct, but some of our young people don't know of it at all. They don't know that we used to go to school, Sunday school, twice on a Sunday, or that we had to be ready for church and our shoes had to be shined. They know about going out Saturday night and being out all Sunday morning, and even their parents don't know where they are at 3:30 Sunday morning. Yes. So parents can be asked, where are your children? But we're not even asking that now. Where is your sister? Where is your auntie at 3 in the morning?
But Mrs. Nottage, if you have parents who themselves now, young parents in this post-modern era that we are living in, who are unchurched, then we have a problem.
We do.
And I had a guest on this program last Sunday who talked about seeking to counsel somebody, and he asked them to repeat John 3:16, and the person was unable to even begin.
Yes.
A parent.
Yeah.
Let's take this final break on the program. We'll come right back.